Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a source that gives a really unique view on the natural world. Specifically, we're looking at the energetic side of dogs, our canine companions.
hmm
We're doing a deep dive into chakras and auras, not just generally, but really focusing on how this one text suggests our dogs interact with the universe on, well, a level we might not usually think about.
Right.
And our mission here is, to unpack this material for you, our listener. We want to pull out the most fascinating ideas and make these pretty complex concepts accessible and hopefully really interesting.
And what's really intriguing, I think, is how this source sets up its whole framework. It doesn't just say chakras are like internal human things.
No.
It frames them as these fundamental centers for interacting with the universe, energetically speaking. And it says they're present across what it calls the four realms of nature. So people, animals, plants, even minerals.
Wow, okay. That's broad.
It is a very broad perspective, yeah.
Right.
But like you said, today we're really drilling down into the part about dogs.
Exactly. And that's where it gets, well, really interesting, I think, when the source starts talking about how dogs differ energetically from us humans, and even how different breeds might have distinct energy profiles.
Based on their history with us, yeah.
Okay, so setting the foundation. The source kicks off with this core idea. Chakras, auras, they exist across all these realms of nature.
Right, foundational elements.
And it calls chakras these vital energy centers, kind of like conduits connecting beings to the larger universal energy field.
That perspective is key, I think,
Mhm.
because it immediately takes it beyond just, human anatomy.
Mm,
The text points out that the number and quality of these chakras, they aren't uniform. They can actually vary between beings.
interesting.
But for our focus, for this deep dive, the source quickly narrows it down to animals, starting with dogs. It does mention other groups. Fish, insects, reptiles have their own unique energetic features, too.
Hints at a bigger picture.
Exactly. Yeah. It suggests a huge, complex topic. But for this section, it stays focused on dogs.
Right. So how does it apply this specifically to dogs? This is where it starts to diverge from the human model most people know.
Yeah, it makes a very clear distinction right away. Mammals, including dogs, have 6 chakras.
6. Okay, not the 7 we usually hear about in humans.
Precisely, 6. That's a fundamental difference according to this source. And it notes their physical locations, well, they roughly line up with where the anterior projections of human chakras are, the front ones.
Anterior. Okay. And what about their posture, being on 4 legs?
That matters, according to the text,
Mhm.
because they're horizontal, not vertical like us. Their main energy channel, the axial channel, it's shifted closer to the spine.
Ah, okay. Close to the spine. And does that affect how their energy works?
It does. It affects how it projects. The text really emphasizes that the anterior projections, the front ones, are much stronger in animals,
Stronger at the front.
while the posterior ones, the back projections, are, well, significantly weaker. So their energy field has this sort of front-loaded quality, you could say.
Fascinating. So they're kind of meeting the world energetically more from the front. And the 6 chakra count, does the source explain that? Why 6, not 7?
Yes, it does. It proposes that the Ajna chakra, the third eye,
Right.
and the Sahasrara, the crown chakra,
The higher ones.
those two are actually combined into a single energy center in animals.
Really? Combined.
That's the explanation given in this source. And that merger is why they end up with 6 main chakras instead of the human 7. It essentially redefines those higher centers within the animal energetic structure.
Wow, okay. That structural difference alone is, well, a pretty big insight from this source. But it gets even more specific, doesn't it, about breeds?
It does. It makes this really compelling claim that the activation level, sort of the prominence of these 6 chakras, varies a lot between dog breeds. And it links this directly to selective breeding, to what we bred them for.
So our history with them has shaped their energy.
That's the idea presented, yeah. That it's left a tangible, energetic imprint. For example, working breeds, like guard dogs. The source points them out specifically.
Okay, guard dogs, what's their profile like?
It says they have strongly expressed power chakras, specifically the Muladhara, the root chakra, and Manipura, the solar plexus.
The root and solar plexus. And that
Right.
makes sense, right? For guarding.
It connects directly to their function. The source links those 2 chakras to things like strength, endurance, speed, all things you'd want in a guard dog.
So it's suggesting those physical traits we bred for aren't just physical, they're tied to these specific energy centers being strong.
According to this text, yes. It's an outward sign of a specific energetic activation.
Yeah.
It gives you a whole different way to look at those capabilities.
It really does. Okay, so what about the opposite end? Companion dogs.
Right, the source uses the term domestic companion dogs. For them, it suggests the more active chakras tend to be the anahata, the heart chakra, and the vishuddha, which is the throat chakra.
Heart and throat. And the source connects that to them being good partners for humans.
That seems to be the idea, anahata, for that connection, that emotional resonance, and maybe vishuddha for their communication, how they interact with us.
Okay.
The source also adds that for most domestic dogs, the energy in their other chakras, the ones besides the heart and throat, is often, well, weaker, less pronounced.
And why is that?
Again, it points to selective breeding. The focus shifted away from those intense working traits, like raw power or speed, towards qualities that make for a good companion.
So breeding for companionship might have energetically dialed down some other centers.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
And the source does mention a potential downside. It suggests this kind of energy imbalance can sometimes lead to health problems.
Interesting point.
It also really highlights the anahata, the heart chakra, in companion dogs. Is this its high activity often leads to that really strong attachment to owners, sometimes almost excessive,
Yeah, we see that.
And the source suggests this strong heart energy really shapes the whole dynamic between the person and the dog.
So that incredibly deep bond, that intense connection people feel, this source is saying it could be energetically rooted in that active heart chakra.
That's the connection it draws. And just circling back to working breeds quickly, the text really hammers home that guard, hunting, combat types, they consistently show that emphasis in Muladhara and Manipura.
The power centers.
Right, reinforcing that link between those chakras and the physical capabilities they need.
Got it. Any other breed specifics?
Yeah, one more interesting point the source brings up involves what it calls noble breeds.
Noble breeds, like...
It doesn't list specific examples in the summary section, but it says that regardless of their original purpose, these noble breeds often show powerful vishuddha activity, the throat chakra again.
Okay, strong throat chakra. And what does that translate to?
According to the source, it manifests as really strong communication and interaction abilities. So that sort of presence or that way certain dogs have of connecting with you.
That might be linked to their throat chakra energy.
That's the potential link suggested by the text, yes. It's quite fascinating how it maps these energetic ideas onto traits we actually recognize in different dogs.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's the internal system, the chakras. What about the external field, the aura? The source talks about that too, right?
It does, yeah. And this part's particularly interesting when it talks about the relationship between the dog and owner.
How so?
Well, the source describes the dog's aura as being either harmonious or disharmonious. And it states pretty clearly that the state of the aura really impacts the dog-owner bond significantly.
Okay. And what if it's disharmonious? What does that look like?
Well, according to the text, if there's a mismatch, an energetic clash between the human's aura and the dog's aura, it can create this kind of subtle friction.
Friction, like what?
Like maybe feeling inexplicably irritated by the dog or just not quite clicking with them, even if there's no obvious reason why. The source calls it a kind of energetic incompatibility.
Huh. That could explain some things, couldn't it? When you meet an animal and just don't feel that connection.
Potentially, yeah. The source also looks at working dog auras again, using guard dogs as the example.
Okay, what about their auras?
Describes them as powerful, sometimes even having an aggressive quality or edge to them. But the key thing here, according to the text, is that this powerful aura is often harmoniously linked with the owner's aura.
Harmoniously linked, like they sync up.
Exactly, creating this sense of energetic unity between them. The source even says that owners of breeds, like, say, German Shepherds, often feel this very deeply.
Oh.
Like they sense the dog almost as an extension of themselves, of their own energy field. They might intuitively know what the dog is feeling or about to do.
Wow, that's a powerful idea, an energetic merger.
It is. The source also mentions hounds briefly, says their aura is strong too, and closely tied to the owner or trainer's energy. But it adds that a hound's aura rarely gets stronger than the owner's.
Interesting nuance there. Okay, so that's working dogs. What about typical domestic dogs? How does the source describe their auras?
It suggests their auras tend to be more adaptable. They often adjust themselves, kind of aligned with the owner's aura, even if their natural energies were different to start with.
So they sort of tune into us energetically, like acclimatizing.
That seems to be the implication, yes. But the source also adds a caveat. This merging, this blending, It's not just one way. It can mean that both positive and negative energetic qualities get transferred between the dog and the owner,
Ah, okay, so it goes both ways. That makes sense.
which leads into the broader dynamic the source discusses, the overall human-dog energy relationship. It mentions that, generally speaking, humans tend to operate at higher vibrational frequencies than dogs.
Higher frequencies, okay.
Yeah, and here the source brings in a bit of a cautionary note. It stressed this is rare, but it suggests that in cases of really excessive attachment, where someone prioritizes the pet's energy or needs way above their own, to an extreme, it could potentially degrade the human's own aura.
Wow, okay. That's quite a warning in the text. Degradation of the human aura.
It's presented as a possibility in extreme, unbalanced situations, but the source immediately balances this. It says that typically the relationship is actually one of mutual energetic enrichment.
Okay, that sounds more like the usual experience.
Right, that they exchange energies, exchange qualities. Each supplies something the other might be missing from their own environment or nature. It frames the normal interaction as a kind of beneficial energetic symbiosis.
A positive exchange. That feels right. So how does the source wrap up its discussion on dogs?
It basically indicates that it's covered enough detail on dogs for its current purpose.
Okay.
And then it states that the next part of the text will shift focus. It's going to start exploring the energetic profiles of cats next.
Ugh, cats. Another fascinating topic for perhaps another deep dive. Okay, so let's just quickly unpack what we've covered from this source today.
Good idea.
We looked at its idea that dogs have this unique 6-chakra system, different from the human 7. How breed and the purpose we bred them for seem energetically linked to which chakras are most active, like power centers for guard dogs, heart and throat for companion.
Right. And then the aura, how it interacts with ours, how it can be harmonious or disharmonious, and how domestic dog auras often tend to adapt to their owners.
Leading to that idea of energetic merging and mutual exchange, usually beneficial, but with that slight caution about extreme imbalance.
Exactly. This dive into the source material, it really pushes you to think beyond just the physical or the emotional bond we have with dogs, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's just there's this whole other potential layer, this energetic dimension, according to this text anyway.
It definitely gives you a new way to think about those bonds and maybe why some dogs just feel different to be around, you know? That energetic compatibility idea is intriguing.
And given that the source proposes this potential for auras to merge, for qualities to transfer, and even that caution about excessive attachment possibly impacting our energy, it does leave you with a thought, doesn't it?
What's that?
Well, it makes you wonder, how much of the energetic harmony or maybe the disharmony you feel with your own dog might actually be influenced by your own personal energy state or by the kind of relationship dynamic you're bringing to the table?
That's definitely something to chew on, something to think about next time you're connecting with your own furry companion. You've just had a deep dive into the energy of dogs.